A jobless, reclusive bum in his mid-30s gets hit by a truck in an attempt to save some high schoolers. After dying in the hospital, he gets reincarnated into another world as a newborn baby with all of his memories and perviness intact. The newly named Rudius then explores stuff around the house during a series of time skips until he can more or less walk on his feet. He then finds some books lying around in a treasure chest that he learns to read during the next year. The books are basically a manual on how to use magic. Rudius, mostly called Rudy by his family, then tries his hand at magic and is able to cast a beginner-level spell without any incantations. He then starts training with his incantation-less magic until he destroys the window to his room with an intermediate-level spell. Paul and Zenith come to investigate and find out about his aptitude for magic and thus decide to hire a magic tutor for him. The magic tutor, Roxy, turns out to be a bit shorter than expected and is really not thrilled to teach him magic. She tells Paul and Zenith, Rudy's parents, that many parents overestimate their children's abilities and think that just because they are a bit above average, they can be master magicians. Roxy soon changes her opinion, however, as Rudy, in a noble attempt to look under her skirt, accidentally cuts the incantation short and his ability being able to do magic without incantation is found out. Roxy says that Rudy might be worth training after all. At the end of the episode, Zenith calls Roxy and Rudy home for some lunch. Rudy begins his magic training under Roxy and is making some really steady progress as he already had the talent, and now he has a great teacher to help him apply all his talent. A year passes and Rudy learns some really advanced magic. On the other hand, Rudy's training with the sword isn't really going quite so well since he is getting thrashed over and over again by Paul. Paul is ranked advanced in all 3 of the swordsmanship styles. Rudy's family holds a small party for Rudy on his 5th birthday. Paul gives him a sword, Zenith gives him a book, and Roxy gives him a wand and tells him that it is gonna be his final lesson. The next day, Roxy tells Rudy that they need to go outside for the final demonstration. But Rudy doesn't want to go outside the house thanks to his trauma from his previous life. Later, Roxy mocks Rudy for not wanting to go outside and motivates him that it is not as scary as he thinks he is. Rudy finally musters up some courage, and with the help of Roxy, he is finally able to go outside. At field, Roxy causes a sacred class spell which causes a big thunderstorm. Rudy then uses his new wand and uses the same spell, even surpassing Roxy's original demonstration. Then Roxy tells him that he has officially graduated since she has nothing to teach him anymore. Roxy leaves the Greer household in an emotional farewell with Rudy. Later on, Rudy finds out that Roxy has left a box that contains her panties. Rudy says that he will treasure that box forever and regularly starts praying to it. After Roxy helped Rudy get over his fear of going outside the house, Rudy started frequently going outside and touching some grass for once. One day, when Rudy was roaming outside, he saw some boys bullying a poor and dirty elf. At first, Rudy doesn't interrupt, but since he has been bullied by others himself before this, Rudy saves the boy in a roundabout way and uses his magic to clean his hair. The boy's hair is green, just like the feared demon tribe of Superds. But Rudy is relieved when he doesn't have a gem on his forehead. The boy tells him that his name is Sylph, and that he would love to learn magic. Rudy agrees and often goes out with Sylph to teach him magic. Sylph makes some decent progress and tells him that he would like to learn incantation-less magic too. Rudy agrees to teach him the trick, but doesn't believe that he can do it. Sylph pulls it off, and thus, Rudy's dreams of being the only one capable of that are shattered. A storm comes raining down on the pair and Rudy takes him to his own home. A bath is ready for Rudy and he tells Sylph to come with him. When he refuses, Rudy forcibly takes off his clothes. It is then revealed that Sylph is in fact a girl. Completely taken aback by this, Rudy tries to apologize to her, but she just runs away. In the end, with Paul's guidance, Rudy and Sylph make up and Rudy now plans to cherish his one new friend. The Grey Rat family is celebrating as Zenith is pregnant again. They are celebrating it together when Lilia reveals that she is pregnant too. The happy atmosphere fades as she reveals that Paul is the father. Paul apologizes for all of this fiasco. Zenith decides to kick Lilia out of the house and berates Paul for cheating on her. Rudy senses the tense atmosphere as Lilia is about to be kicked out and shifts all the blame on Paul, saying that Lilia cannot refuse his order since he is her employer. Paul sees what Rudy is doing and goes along with it, so Zenith decides to let Lilia stay. It is revealed, however, that Lilia is the one who had seduced Paul. Lilia thanks Rudy for this and finally accepts him as part of the family. Before this, she was terrified of him and his pervy gaze, which she really should be. Paul gets a bit insecure about the fact that Rudy is really mature and he doesn't get to be a father for him. After 9 months, Norn and Aisha, his 2 little sisters, are born. Rudy then receives a letter from Roxy, which says that Rudy should go to a magic university when he gets 12 years old. Rudy is overjoyed, and when he tells Sophie about it, she says that she wants to go too. Sophie's family cannot afford it though, and when Rudy tells his family to pay for it, they refuse. Rudy then decides to take on a job to support himself and Sylphie. Later on, Paul makes Rudy faint and puts him in the carriage of his friend Ghislaine. When Rudy wakes up from that peck on the head by Paul's sword, Ghislaine gives him a letter written by Paul who dictates that since Rudy would just argue his way out of stuff, he forced this on him. The cart is headed for the city of Roa, where he would be working at his cousin's house. He is not supposed to make any contact with Sylphie or home for the next 5 years, and he has to do this job if he wants to pay his own and Sylphie's dues for the university. He also writes a lot about Ghislaine. He writes that he has never been able to defeat her except in bed. When they reach the city of Roa, they find out that Rudy's job is to tutor their child. He is supposed to teach her magic and how to read and write. Rudy is met with some very harsh reception from the girl named Eris, and she punches him straight in the face the moment she meets him. Swallowing his pride, Rudy tells her father and grandfather that they should orchestrate a fake kidnapping scenario so that she can come to respect Rudy. They agree and the fake kidnapping is arranged. However, one of Philip's servants is in cahoots with some real kidnappers and they orchestrate a real kidnapping. Rudy and Eris escape, and despite not knowing what is going on, Rudy saves Eris multiple times. They reach the city somehow, but the kidnappers are still not going to let go of them. But Rudy's magic is able to hold them off until Ghislaine arrives to save the day. Eris accepts Rudy as her teacher, and as a sign of kinship, she tells him to call her by her given name instead of my lady. Philip thanks Rudy for saving Eris, as they did not expect the situation to become like that. He also tells him not to tell anyone else about his connections to the Grey Rat family, or he may be targeted again. Rudy begins teaching math, magic, and reading to Eris and Ghislaine, while Ghislaine teaches the two swordsmanship. Eris is a much more capable swordsman than Rudy and is actually very impressive for her age. She is not that keenly interested in other stuff, however. Rudy is at an impasse on how to make her interested in this stuff and asks Ghislaine to motivate her. Ghislaine tells a story about her days as an adventurer when she felt quite inferior to others because she couldn't count. Rudy then decides to give Eris a day off every week to keep her motivated to learn. On her day off, Rudy goes along with Eris and Ghislaine to take a tour of the market. Rudy being the pervert, he is interested in an aphrodisiac. Eris tries to buy it for him, but he refuses as he told her that he would only take a present from her if she buys it from her own allowance. Eris then asks him what an allowance is and later on asks Philip for it. Philip agrees and Eris buys that vial for Rudy as a gift. However, Rudy is flustered since he can't tell him what it is. As the 10th birthday of Eris draws closer, Rudy gives a part of his lesson time to a dance tutor so that Eris could learn to dance with the nobles at the huge party that's going to be arranged for her birthday. In the meantime, Rudy gets some free time, so he sees some books that he cannot understand. He finds out that they are all written in the demon tongue. So Rudy writes a letter to Roxy asking for her help as she herself is from the demon continent. Rudy makes a lot of progress in learning the demon tongue and is now able to read a bit from all those books. At the party, Eris tries to dance with a noble kid but fails to do it and falls down. Rudy then steps up, takes her hand, and tells her to relax, and they both perform a splendid dance in front of everybody. Eris thanks Rudy for his contribution. In the end, Rudy sees Eris' grandfather Soros. He comments on the strange ball of light in the sky and is afraid that it might be an ominous sign. 2 years pass by and Eris, along with her family, celebrates Rudy's 10th birthday now. Rudius is bummed out about the fact that his own family could not attend because Paul is busy cleaning up the monsters that are roaming around in the country, the first time they actually hear of him working. However, Rudy celebrates his birthday and receives a brand new top-tier magic staff from Eris and is really thankful to her for it. Philip wants Rudy to marry Eris and succeed him in his family line, but Rudy rejects the offer. We all know he really wanted to accept that. The next day, a huge dark cloud appears across the continent. Rudy, Ghislaine, and Eris go out in the wild for Rudy to test out his new staff. However, a man named Arumanfi attacks Rudy since he has a misunderstanding that Rudy is the reason these dark clouds have appeared. Ghislaine clears up the misunderstanding and Arumanfi goes back. So Rudy continues his demonstration, but a massive burst of light engulfs them all as Rudy shields Eris from the impact. Rudy is back to his old self in a place that's filled with white mist. Rudy thinks that he must have dreamt all of his 10 years of life up till now. There he meets a very weird-looking person who calls himself Man-God. He tells him that he has been observing him for a very long time and that he only wants to help him. He tells him to help the man he sees right after he wakes up if he wants to survive. Rudy then wakes up and meets a man named Rudyard Superdia from the scary and bloodthirsty demon race, the Superds. Rudyard tells them that he's not hostile and that he will escort them through the demon continent. Later, Eris wakes up and gets extremely scared after she sees Rudyard. The man must be really used to this reaction by now. After some convincing, Rudyard takes the duo to the nearby Migridia village. The village happens to be Roxy's birthplace. During their stay, Rudyard tells them that it was demon god Laplace who gave the Superds their cursed spears, turning them all into mindless murderers. He further tells them that the spear he is holding now belonged to his son, whose death brought Rudyard to his senses. Rudyard wants to help these two children because he thinks that's his way to atone for his sins. The trio departs from their village and begins its journey through the demon continent. As they are about to leave, Rudy tells Roxy's parents that he would one day come there as the husband of their daughter. Rudy, Rudyard, and Erez arrive at the village of Rikarisu. However, they would need to do something about Rudyard first. So Rudy dyes his hair blue to disguise him as one of the Migrudia tribe. They enter the city and then enroll in a guild to gather money for their journey. Rudy names his team Dead End and aims to get out of the city as soon as possible. However, he cannot do it since their ranking is too low to fetch them some actual good money. A man-god tells Rudy to take on the Find a Lost Pet mission. On this mission, they find a party that kidnaps people. Rudyard kills one of the people from that party and Rudy reprimands him for that. He tells him to promise him that he won't kill anybody. Rudy then tells the other two members to take on dangerous missions so that Rudy and the others can succeed in getting enough money for their expenses. After the Mana Surge way back in Fitoa, everyone from Rudy's original family is scattered around the world. Meanwhile, Rudy and the others pick up a quest to slay a beast. They meet up with others in the forest and decide to have a go with the monster together. The monster appears, and it's really strong. Rudy flinches in the face of the danger and it costs the life of one of the other party members. Later on, as Rudy is about to die, Rudyard saves him, and then he and Erez slay the monster. Rudyard then gets angry about Rudy waiting for a chance, and he apologizes. A guy then finds out about Rudy's plan to exploit those other party members for more dangerous missions and wants to expose them. Rudyard reveals his identity to him and intimidates him so that he won't leak the information. After a while, the company departs from the village and sets its sights on a coastal city near the edge of the continent. Rudy and Rudyard settle aside their differences and Rudyard accepts Rudy as a warrior instead of a child. Rudyard shaves his hair too to completely avoid any suspicion whatsoever. Rudy and the others arrive at a coastal city that has a port. Roxy and some others also arrive in the same city on a boat. Roxy is also looking for Paul's missing family. She sees the posters of the popularity of Dead End, but Rudy is written as Kennel Master there, so Roxy doesn't recognize him. Later on, Rudy is guided by the man-god to buy food and pass through a specific street. Rudy passes through that street and gives food to a bit too lightly dressed Loli. She tells him that she is the renowned demon empress Kashirika. She thanks Rudy by giving him a demon eye that can see a bit into the future, leading Rudy to save a guy who almost had an accident. Later that day, Rudy tells the others about these events and he takes a few days alone to get used to his new vision. When he is used to it, he spars with Erez and completely destroys her in hand-to-hand combat, something that seemed too far-fetched to be true. Rudy tries to book the tickets to the central continent, but since Rudyard is a Superd, the fee to transport him is very high. Rudy wonders if he should sell his staff, but Rudyard tells him not to do it since it would hurt Erez's feelings. In the end, a man named Gallus appears with an offer. Roxy looks everywhere for Paul's family and finds nothing while one of his partners seems to have other plans. Roxy looks all around and finds nothing. She comes across Erez and Rudyard sparring but thinks that they are both Superds and runs away. Meanwhile, Gallus offers to smuggle Rudyard alongside him if Rudy liberates some goods for him on the other side of the sea. Rudy and Rudyard reluctantly agree. When Rudy reaches the other side, he realizes that he is supposed to liberate beast children being held by smugglers. Rudy gets angry and liberates them all with the help of an extremely angry Rudyard. On his way, Rudy finds the cutest thing on the show, a magic dog. He frees it, but the local beast men who came to free their children think Rudy is one of the smugglers and take him captive. Rudy is captured in Doldia village and is quite literally stripped naked of all his belongings. He jokes that it might awaken something inside him. He can easily break out of the cell anytime he wants to, but he doesn't as he doesn't want to antagonize the villagers. He instead decides to wait for Rudyard and Erez. Rudy is later joined by Geese, another human prisoner who did something to offend them. Geese calls Rudy his senpai and they both discuss how beast women are cute. Truly master and student. The village is later attacked and burned by Gallus and his men. Rudy and Geese escape captivity, but Rudy decides to help the villagers instead. Rudy uses his sacred water magic to put out the fire and then tries to fight Gallus. But Gallus proves himself to be a worthy opponent. The magic dog and Geese help him in defeating Gallus once and for all. Rudyard and Erez then come to the village and tell Rudy that they were delayed because they were wiping out the rest of the smugglers. The villagers thank Rudy and apologize for everything they've done to him. Back at Fitoa, Erez's grandfather is blamed for everything that happened in the Mana Surge and is executed before the king. As the rainy season starts, Rudy and others have no choice but to stay in Doldia village and pass their time idly. But Eris befriends a girl named Tona, who is the daughter of Guys, the village's best warrior. Seeing as they all are beast warriors, Eris mentions Ghislaine and everyone is shocked. They all have a very negative view of Ghislaine and say that she abandoned her home for an adventure. Eris tries to defend her, but she soon stops as she thinks it's useless. Tona, who was never interested in sword fighting, asks Eris to teach her. Eris happily agrees and the two become the best of friends. Gies tells everyone that he feels responsible as Ghislaine was very rebellious in her childhood years, and that's why the villagers decided it was best if she left with some adventurers, and that's exactly what happened. Gies hitch a ride with our trio and they all depart. The gang reaches the capital city of Milis and splits up with Gies as he tells them that he has some business to attend to. Rudy tells everyone to take a day off and do their own thing. As Rudy is out alone, he follows some people who appear to be kidnappers and tries to save a cat girl and some others. He wouldn't have done it for cat boys though. Rudy tries to save them but is intercepted by a really skilled swordsman. The swordsman is revealed to be Paul as he recognizes Rudy. Paul, now a drunkard, completely devastated and tired, takes Rudy to a bar where he tells him that everyone else from his party was staying at. All of them were victims of the mana surge and were looking for their families. Paul asks Rudy if he was safe, then why did he not write about it or try to look for any of the other surviving members. Rudy has no answer to that as he was too busy surviving himself. He doesn't want to worry Paul, so he tells him about his adventures in a happy tone. Paul misinterprets it all and they both start fighting. Norn interrupts the fight and everyone starts to give weird looks to Rudius. Rudy runs away from the place as everybody shunning him reveals memories of his past and he can't bear any of them. Seeing Rudy so unusually depressed and out of it, Eris tries to console him. Gies confronts Paul and apparently has known him for many years. He tells him that he was wrong in that fight. He tells him that surviving the demon continent is no joke and that he should be happy Rudy is alive instead of blaming a 10-year-old child for not thinking of others before saving himself. That's a sound argument until you realize he is not really 10. Paul says that it's exactly because Rudy is so talented that he expected a lot from him. Gies then tells him that if he didn't want to be reunited with his son in this way, that he'd want to see a limbless, lifeless husk of a human being who he was sure wouldn't live much longer. Paul has nightmares imagining that scenario and decides to go apologize to Rudy. Paul and Rudy sit in a bar and Rudy realizes that Paul is trying to apologize, but he doesn't know how to handle that situation either, so the atmosphere is really awkward. But in the end, they both have some heart-to-heart and are finally able to reconcile. Rudy tells him that he would look for his family once he drops Eris home. Paul then visits Rudy's inn and Eris is ready to have a go at Paul for hurting Rudy. Rudy tells her that they have made up. He also tells them that they don't need to stay in any town anymore as they have a permit from a knight and a lot of travel money for the remainder of their adventure. Paul also thanks Rudyard for protecting his child, and they all have an emotional farewell. In the end, Gies is revealed to have been searching for Paul's family already and is still planning to do so in the part of the continent that nobody has done yet. On the other side of the continent, Roxy visits her home village Megurdia. It's revealed that her tribe talks with telepathy, and that she is one of the very few odd ones who cannot use it. Roxy hasn't come home in many years and her parents really missed her. She tries to leave since they are still awkward around one another, but decides to stay in the end. They also tell her that Rudy has visited the village 2 years ago. Roxy is relieved that he is safe. In the end, she once again departs, with her party to go look for Paul's family across the demon continent. Rudy once again has a dream where he meets Man-God. Man-God tells him a way to see Lilia and Aisha again. Rudy is really happy upon hearing these names and decides to once again follow Man-God's advice. Upon reaching the kingdom of Chiron, Rudy remembers that Roxy was stationed at the castle there. He writes a letter to her and posts it. Later on, he encounters Aisha and saves her from some pursuers. Rudy does not reveal his name to Aisha, following the Man-God's instructions, and asks Aisha who that letter was for. Aisha tells him that it's a letter to her father as she needs to save herself and her mother who is trapped in a castle. She also calls her brother a complete no-good pervert since she saw the box that had Roxy's panties. Despite being embarrassed, Rudy tells her that he would help her and gives her to Rudyard and Eris to keep under protection as he goes to the castle by Roxy's summons. Rudy is captured by the castle guards as this is a trap. He finds out that Roxy is not here and Prince Pax is holding Lilia hostage. Roxy left a long while ago and Pax plans to use Rudy as bait for dragging her back to him since Roxy kept fanboying over Rudy when she was teaching Pax. Rudy is kept in a magic cell where all of his magic gets absorbed and nullified. Rudy is met by Zenoba, the third prince of Chiron, who asks him where he bought the Rudyard figure inside his bag. He tells him that he made it, and as soon as that happens, Zenoba starts fanboying over him and tells him that he's a really big fan of Rudy since he has a Roxy figure that Rudy had made quite a while back. Meanwhile, Eris and Rudyard are being smuggled into the castle by the guards as a few hours ago. They came to ask for their help since their families are being held captive by packs. They see Zenoba walking towards something as they are sneaking into the castle. Aisha reveals that Zenoba is a blessed child and has superhuman strength. Zenoba brings Pax in front of Rudy and forces him to listen to everything Rudy says. The guards also drop their weapons as soon as they hear that their families are safe. Everything goes smoothly as Lilia and Aisha are arranged to be taken home. Lilia hugs Rudy and tells him that she missed him. They both have a heartfelt combo and Lilia gives Rudy a necklace that Sylphie had made for him on his 10th birthday. As they are departing, Rudy gives the necklace that Roxy gave him to Aisha to keep as a keepsake of him. As they turn their heads, Aisha pokes out of the window and tells Rudy that she's sorry for calling him a pervert, which means that she knew who he was all along. On their journey through a cave, the trio encounters dragon god Orsted. Completely paralyzed by fear, Eris and Rudyard can't move while Rudy is unfazed. They try to warn him, but he doesn't listen. Orsted thinks that Rudy is an apostle of the man god and attacks him. He makes quick work of Rudyard and Eris. He then proceeds to wound Rudy, but is surprised that he can cast such powerful magic, and that too without incantations. He says that he might be on the level of Laplace and gives him a fatal blow. Before dying, Rudy meets the man god once again, who tells him that he would have foretold him about Orsted if he wasn't free from his vision. He also tells him that since Laplace had green hair, Rudyard's curse was because of that. He also tells him that it's not lifted for the most part as he has shaved his hair. Rudy thanks the man god for everything he has done, even though he doesn't know what his intentions are, and prepares to go to the afterlife. However, Rudy wakes up in the land of the living as Nanahashi. The girl at Orsted's side chipped in and helped him live by convincing Orsted that he was not a threat. After waking up, Rudy explains the whole man god situation to Rudyard and tells him about the curse on him fading away. The next day, Rudy reaches his hometown and gets a really nostalgic feel from it. He goes on a trip down the memory lane as Rudyard says his farewell to the kids. He tells them that both of them are not children anymore and don't need protection. Eris is unwilling to let him go, but comes to terms with it, and they both say an emotional farewell full of tears to Rudyard. Later on, the duo finally reaches Ro. The city is in ruins and both of Eris' parents are dead. One of the branch families of Greyrad's offered to marry her, but Ghislaine is against this idea. Eris doesn't give any reply and later at night visits Rudy's tent. This only means one thing, and this time it's exactly that. She is there to have sex with Rudy, who tries to refuse her since she is not thinking clearly because of all the sadness. But Rudy is unable to stop himself as she tells him to satisfy this kitten. Frankly, no one would blame Rudy after this. The next day, Rudy wakes up really happy because of what happened last night, but is shocked to find out that Eris and Ghislaine have disappeared somewhere. Rudy goes into depression and completely secludes himself from everything. He spends his days loitering away as he's all alone and has many flashbacks to his old days in his previous life. Meanwhile, Eris is on a journey with Ghislaine now to get strong so that she can beat Orsted and protect Rudy as she loves him. Rudyard rescues some people from beasts and tells them that he is a Superd, but they don't seem to be scared of him and still praise him for his heroics. Geese and Zenoba are on their own journeys as they think fondly about Rudy. Keys and Tona keep up their swords fighting training. Roxy encounters Kashirika and pays her tab in yet another act of naive innocence. She asks Kashirika about the whereabouts of Paul's family and finds out that Lilia and Aisha have successfully reunited with Norn and Paul, while Zenith is located somewhere in the labyrinth city of Rapan on the Begarit continent. Roxy thanks her for all this information and departs with her party towards Zenith as soon as she can. Rudy then has a flashback to his old life at home and remembers that in a very beautiful way, Zenith told him that she loves him. Rudy wakes up after this, takes a step forward, and goes out in the open to save Zenith. The end. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.